Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
Good evening to our viewers. Welcome to the broadcast. I hope everyone can hear audio properly. Please give me a thumbs up. You can hear. All right, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. All right, good. Sir, I want to start this evening. Every time I hear anybody say anything about space, what always comes to my mind is that it seems that Prof loves the space idea a lot. But today, it's a slightly different twist because now we're hearing of secret programs where the US has found ships that are of non-human origin, according to someone's claim. And we've also had the news this week of some archaeologists having discovered what may be the world's oldest burial site in South Africa. So I brought those two things together and I thought, let me ask you first this evening before we go into our questions. What is your thought on this ships of non-human origin? What do you think about it, sir? Are we alone or not?
I think that, frankly, I think a rational conclusion is that we are not alone. I think to be the height of arrogance for us to think we are the only being in the cosmos. I don't believe we are alone. But there's no conclusive evidence. I've stopped believing everything I read on the social media now. There are little tidbits of comment by American presidents who you will believe have been briefed, which gives the indication that they don't give you a categorical answer. It's like when you say, I don't want to talk about that, then it means there is something, but you just don't want to talk about it. From the time of what's the name of this American president, the one who came to Nigeria?
Jimmy Carter?
Yes, Jimmy Carter. From the time of Jimmy Carter, even Jimmy Carter has come outright to say he believes there are extraterrestrial organizations. And there are people who swore, especially pilots, that they've seen these ships which maneuver in such a way that you cannot describe. So when yesterday the news broke that a whistleblower, and his name has been mentioned, it's all over the internet, said he's prepared to appear before Congress to say categorically that the Americans have, were not captured, but that there's been an intact spaceship that crash landed and that the Americans are in possession of it. I believe it. I believe it. But are we that smart that we actually captured this vehicle or vehicles, or were we allowed because everybody says the technology is so advanced that we are trying to, that the American scientists are trying to do what they call reverse engineering, just to see whether they also could build ships like that. Uh, 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 are we saying that the people who build this kind of thing are incapable of rescuing these vehicles? There are supposed to have been dead pilots captured, pilots who are still alive captured. And I say to myself, um, are we saying that the people who build these ships, whose pilots these people are incapable of rescuing them? Or are they just allowing us to keep these specimens for whatever reason? Maybe they want to see what we will do with them. And if my conjecture is true, I will then say that they are also incapable of, for example, seizing the the revolving spaceship, the one built by the Russians and the Americans that is still going around. So, questions, 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 no definitive answers. And I should be the last one you should ask to give you answers, since my science my science knowledge is limited to A-level science. So we will just we will all just continue to speculate. And when all these things come out bit at a time, well, we shouldn't get frightened. I understand the reason why the the American government says it doesn't want to release all the evidence, that is so that we don't go into a state of panic. But it's already out there. It's already out there. And as regards, I mean, we haven't even finished discovering what is on Earth, because you made reference to this old burial site that is not supposed to be the oldest evidence in terms of our trajectory from ape to human beings. They are now discovering that this humanoid practice burial, which is supposed to mean that they have a social consciousness. They simply just didn't abandon, their dead bodies on the surface. And that is evidence of some cognitive behavior on their part. And that this now, I mean, they thought that we human beings are the only ones that have the kind of cognitive social behavior to bury our dead. And we are now discovering that there are, I think there's another species, not as advanced as us, but who also have this. Well, we'll just continue to dig, and we will continue to come up with more findings. But as I said, it's rather, how do we put it? We haven't even found 1/10 of what is in the earth, that we are now seizing spaceships more advanced than our knowledge allows. Well, it makes it interesting to be alive.
Well, hopefully we'll find the answer to that question not too long. And for your love of space, I will personally nominate you for the first foreign minister for space affairs.
Why are you people all against me? Some have nominated that I should be put on board the first Nigerian spaceship to go into space and get rid of me. Now you are suggesting no, 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 no. I'm too old for all that. You, the young people, want to take over. So pick your volunteers from those who are in their 40s and 50s, and leave those of us alone. No volunteers from my age group, sir.
Thank you for that, sir. Well, let's go into the more serious matters. I'll start from Nigeria. There's been quite a lot of brouhaha about fuel subsidy, and some have said there are issues with the timing of it, should have been timed better. Others have said what an opportune time for it to have happened. What's your take on fuel subsidy and the whole situation there, sir?
Thank you for this question. And you'll be surprised at my take on it. I praise Tinubu for taking the horn, or taking the bull by the horn on the very first, not even on the first hour in office, and declaring it done and dusted, and be prepared to face down the opposition to it. His vice president said that they are aware of the forces behind the subsidy, how strong they are, and that that they know the kind of pushback that they will expect. Yes, the very following day, the usual thing, in fact, not the very following day, that very day, queues, panic buying, and all this kind of thing. Within 24, 48 hours, the queue disappeared. The prices came crashing down from the panic price that they raised it to. And now we have a sense of normality. That's the first thing I will draw attention to. The second is, once there's now evidence that Tinubu is not going to back down the way other governments backed down. In other West African countries, Benin Republic, Togo, Cameroon, and so on, their prices skyrocketed as they now knew that there was a government in place in Nigeria that in a way was going to deal with the subsidy fraud by simply closing that gate of smugglers. Their prices skyrocketed, which is evidence. You don't need any other scientific data that it was the smugglers in a way that were collecting the subsidy that we were funding, and not the Nigerians. And so the prices have come crashing down and stabilized, and it is still the lowest in Africa. Thirdly, I want us to move away from this issue from this issue of palliatives for workers onto grounds. One, when we say our refineries are not working, why was it space people who were supposed to be operating those refineries? Were they not Nigerian workers who have been collecting their salaries for donkey years without those refineries producing 1 liter of petroleum? They were Nigerian workers. They were not foreign workers. So why do you have to listen to the brouhaha being thrown up by the trade unionists that the Nigerian workers must now be compensated for removing the subsidy? It's the whole of Nigerians. Nigerian workers, what percentage are they of the Nigerian population? The market woman, the Nigerian farmer, are they not Nigerians? Are they not going to be hit by the prices variation that are going to be a part of the consequence of removing the subsidy? The point is, the money saved should go not on increasing salaries or allowances for workers. It should go on infrastructure, health, education, that kind of social indices that affect the life pattern of every Nigerian. To me, that's where the savings should go. And we would then all be beneficiaries. But to now say, no, you are going to increase the salaries by 200%, and take salary, no, more than that. One of the labor unions is asking for 200,000 naira as basic minimum wage. How many workers do we have in Nigeria? And what is the percentage of the Nigerian population? If you like, both the elite and the workers bear responsibility for the oppressed. They shouldn't sell us that. They shouldn't sell us. I mean, that mantra that the workers are oppressed in Nigeria. All Nigerians. The 90% of Nigerians who are neither workers nor the elite are the oppressed in Nigeria. So I hope that the palliatives will be devoted to programs that will benefit all Nigerians, remove the burden of poverty on all Nigerians. That's my take on the subsidy.
Sir, I'm going to challenge some of the points there because, and to our viewers, if you please put your views on there, because I think you're making a separation between the government, the elite, the workers, and the general population in Nigeria. But regardless of the government's position, the workers would still be responsible to a large extent for the implementation of the policies. And maybe those workers are underpaid anyway, and therefore a certain percentage should go to rewarding the workers and making sure that you get the right caliber of people working to ensure that when these funds become available, they are disbursed in the right way. If the workers can't feed their families, can't get their children into good schools and things like that. So that's my take on that, and that's my challenge, sir, that maybe a portion should go to the workers as well.
Please let me join you in please inviting our fellow compatriots on the platform to join in this debate. You are you are right that the workers should benefit from palliatives. I'm not saying they shouldn't benefit, but that their benefits should be part of benefits to all Nigerians. It's like you are saying we should bribe them to do their job. In any case, I mean, what job? What job? At the workers, I gave you the example. The same workers who ran down the refineries, and why didn't they give up their salaries and emoluments and allowances for the 4 years or more that the refineries have not been working? If one is to, make a logical, projection of the argument, now that now that you are going to suffer because subsidies have been removed, you now want to be compensated. Well, what do you want to are you going to refund the salaries and emoluments and allowances that have been paid all these years when the refineries have not been working? There has been a reluctance or a lack of political muscle, I know you call it will, on the part of government to do the right things, simply because those who are running the government were also part of the cabal that has almost driven Nigeria to the edge of the precipice. But if we are now going to have a disciplined government, let it discipline all of us. That's the point that I'm making. I'm not saying that you should exclude the workers. No. But the whole argument that is being made now, and that's why I made reference to the demand that workers should be paid 200,000 naira minimum wage. Nobody is talking about it. How about nurses? How about medical doctors? They've been leaving Nigeria in drones. How about engineers? The state of our roads, appalling. These same workers are the ones also running the power stations that we have, problems with the power supply that has closed down factories in Nigeria and driven those factories to Cameroon and Ghana and Sierra Leone. So let's have a level playing field. If we put the money we are saving, if we move it from subsidy to infrastructural development, health, more hospitals, and better allowances for our doctors and nurses, build housing schemes for them, education. I think UNESCO said, I don't remember the percentage that we are supposed to have for education. There's no state in Nigeria, and definitely not the federal government, has come close to that percentage. None. Well, let us make an effort, because if you look at why we made so much progress during that period from 1954 to 1962, before the rain started falling on our heads, it was investment in education, investment in hospital. We have free health service, free education, another kind of thing, quality education for that matter. Teacher training colleges were set up where people with skills, but do you know, I think it's in Finland, And one should say this loud and clear. Finland, the people with first-class degrees are recruited to teach in primary schools, and they are better paid than people teaching in universities, because Finland believes that you mold the youth, the children, at that level, and that's where you expose them to the best skills. So it's people with first-class degrees that are recruited to teach in the primary schools. In Kaduna, there was a time when the governor there set the same exam that the students were supposed to take for the teachers. And most of the teachers failed that exam. And yet the teachers were supposed to train the students to pass these exams. They failed. So he laid off most of them. And of course, the trade unions, how? But what was the skill of the teachers? The skills were not there. They are just earning salaries for being called teachers. So this is the point that I'm making. I'm not saying exclude the public servants and the civil servants. No, not saying you exclude them. No, there will be gradations. Of course, I'm just painting wide brushes on the canvas of what we should do with the savings from removing subsidy.
Thank you, sir. Quite a few reactions to your comments there. I'll pick a few of them here. This one says the government should remove subsidy totally. A bit more radical here. Reduce working days for government workers to 3 days. Workers should spend their extra days in business development, farming, skills acquisition, and trading as palliatives initiatives. Please do not increase workers' salary. The current inflation will triple and salaries will increase and it will be useless. So that's one comment from one person here. Another one says, the cost of governance is unaffordable to the country. If political offices are stripped of all the huge salaries and benefits, then it becomes less attractive. And that way we get honest citizens who truly want to serve and not loot the nation. Let me get your response from those two before I pick all the other ones that I can see here, sir.
I completely agree. I completely agree with what you've read out. Look, my father was principal of a secondary school as well as a federal parliamentarian. And Parliament at that time was a part-time. There was days for sitting. All the other days, he was back in his school, running his school. They were paid sitting allowances, not salaries. And yet they gave of their best to the country. I'm talking about the period from 54, I believe, to the coup took place in 66. That of the period when membership of the parliament was on part-time basis. It was the ministers and the parliamentary secretaries who were on full-time. So I agree with him that it should be on part-time basis and not what we have now. That if I knew we were going to go into this, I would have brought. In fact, it's on my phone because one has been involved in discussing this. Nigerian parliamentarians are the highest paid in the world. the Nigerian senator earns $2,350,000 a year, while the American senator, the British parliamentarian, the Swiss parliamentarian, even some of these are on part-time basis. So I do agree with them. I mean, with the suggestion made. I also agree that, I mean, the civil servants, even when they come to work, you are supposed to be there by 8 o'clock. How many of them are on seat by 8 o'clock? And when they are on seat, this may not be their fault. I mean, if you had woken up at 3 a.m. To take the staff bus, how many hours sleep have you got? You get there, and most of them have their heads on the table, sleeping. There are people who bring materials, and this includes teachers, who try to force their kids to get their mothers to come and buy materials. They are traders, even when they are supposed to be working. It's probably the top echelon, the permanent secretaries, the directors, probably at that level. And it's overpolluted. The civil service is overpolluted. So it's a good idea to have them, and in any case, COVID had already taught us that you can work from home. Although you may say in Nigeria, where is the internet connection that makes you work from home? But I think all these radical ideas are worth trying.
There's a point here from someone. This person is from Ogbomoso in Nigeria. This person says, can the government work on our power to reduce our consumption of PMS? For example, in Ogbomoso, we have electricity for about 1 hour daily. I think you've already addressed that because you've talked about putting the money into infrastructure. Someone else here is saying, but Prof, a lot of professionals are leaving Nigeria in droves, not just the medical profession. I guess that person is advocating for the increased salaries there as a way of retaining people. And another comment here from someone saying that the workers' union is acting as an interest group, protecting only the narrow interests of its members at the expense of other Nigerians. I agree with the total removal of subsidy, but we need some urgent shock absorbers alongside what they are planning. And the person outlines a few things similar to what you've said about infrastructure, and it's a good time. Yeah, so quite a lot of comments here. I'm not sure if we can pick all the comments that have been sent. But there's one here. I'll pick the last one here from Peter Osambi. Bear with me if I did not pronounce that correctly. Peter says, one of the reasons some of us are opposed to subsidy removal is that the cost of governance is rising every day. We can save money from the retinue of government officials. For instance, what would the president be needing 200 special advisors for? And is in addition to the ministers and the permanent secretaries. My argument is that we must reduce the cost of governance and other wastages. Very good point, sir.
I mean, I agree on reducing the cost of governance. We need to. Incidentally, I think most presidents have asked for 20 advisors, special advisors, not 200. But there are other areas where you could cut down this cost of governance. When I was a minister, there were only 3 vehicles attached to me and to every minister. The one you are riding in the backup, and the security car. That's all. I am now, I'm shocked when I see almost 10 to 15 vehicles in the convoy of a minister. That's unconscionable. Definitely that can be cut down. The same thing when you look at the convoy of the president or the vice president. Yes, I know the United States, you see, the convoy of the American president is almost 1 mile long. But the convoy of the British Prime Minister, how many vehicles in it? So, yes, we've copied the American presidential system, but we don't need to copy the extravagance of the American presidential system. I don't know how many airplanes we have in the presidential fleet. I know that, again, when I was in government, I think there were only 4 airplanes that we had in the presidential fleet. So you are quite right. We can cut down on the cost of governance. Do we need, and here, let me say something controversial again. Do we need the office of the First Lady? And I know the mood in the country is very hostile to the establishment and the running of the office of First Lady. Frankly, I am in favor of the office of the First Lady because there are tragedies that we have in the country where there's a need for compassion to be shown. Even if the president is going to make an address to the nation, when a church or a mosque is blown up, or when there is an accident where, women and children are involved, the First Lady steps out to the visit, to show compassion, to show sympathy. And this is coming from the very top. It makes a whole difference to the nation that, they, and when they say they really mean all of us who form members of the elite. They care about us. But do you know the church that was blown up in Norway, the Catholic Church blown up in Norway, where a lot of men, women, children were killed? Yes, the vice president went there, but there was nobody from that higher up. The president never even made an address to the nation. His wife, busy complaining about the power struggle in the villa all the time, never went on a trip there. The Minister for Humanitarian Affairs never showed up. It didn't concern her. These are not good evidence of a caring government. But then you may say, Buhari never said he was a caring government. So, I believe that like every arm of government, there's also the need to streamline the office of the First Lady, not to cancel it. And she can be the compassionate arm of the presidency.
Yeah, but sir, you said it was controversial, and I do accept that it's very controversial, because what then happens to someone who is contesting and doesn't have a wife? Does that then automatically rule them out? Or hope it doesn't happen in this case, but what if the wife of the president were to pass on, right? Does it have to be the wife of the president to show the compassionate side? Could it not be someone who is maybe more senior that is showing the compassionate side of the government, not necessarily the wife? So yes, if the president has a wife, then the president's wife can go out as the president's wife, but not in an official capacity where you've created an office that's specifically for that person. That would be my challenge to that, sir.
Well, I mean, it's always good to challenge my views. I even enjoy it when my views are challenged, because at least it means, people are paying attention to what I'm saying. I mean, if there is no first lady, then that office goes into abeyance. The wife of the vice president will then step into the void. I don't mean that she becomes the first lady. She cannot leave one husband for another. But she steps into, into the void and performs that compassionate role. And it will be highly unlikely that both the first lady and the second lady will, their posts will become vacant. But should that happen, we'll feel our way through. But I'm just explaining why I am not in favor of abolishing that post. I know we're angry about the way those posts have been abused. Not just by the last first lady, but the previous one before that, and what have you. Yes, I mean, I understand, but it's against part of the malaise. The office of the presidency, the whole bureaucracy. I just made reference to the motorcade of ministers have been abused. In streamlining, let's not throw out the baby with the bathtub, with the bath water. Let's not do that. We could have a decent, level-headed first lady. They do in other countries.
Thank you for that, sir. There's a comment here before I move away from this topic. This person says, Dr. Dakothomos, thank you, sir. Good evening, sir. This person says, until Nigerians understand that the fundamentals of service to one's country are inherent in the honor and privilege of the call made to them to serve their fatherland, they can never appreciate the value of remunerative tokenism. And I think that's a really powerful statement there. But at the same time, sir, people need to survive. People need to eat. People need to get themselves to where they're going to execute the work. So, oh, wow, more comments coming in, sir. The office of the First Lady remains critical to the call for female inclusion in politics and government. In monarchical democracies, and I can see what you've written there. We see the roles and the figure that we see the figure of, well, it plays a role. I think there's some errors in that comment. However, there should be boundaries and there should be checks. This person is making the case for women inclusion, which is fantastic. Sir, let me move the topic on to another important.
Sorry, sir. Before you move on, because
yes,
I always like to remind us that there was a time when you had the Mrs. Awolowo's, Mrs. Azikwe's, Mrs. Okpara. We never even saw Mrs. Balewa or Mrs. Sadauna. But there was a time when our wives of premiers did not abuse their posts. So the concept of the first lady is not the only thing we could. It's not the model of the first lady we have now. Is not the only model that even we have practiced in Nigeria. And while I agree completely and totally with Dr. Dapper Thomas, we could streamline things. We've done that before. I think abuse and misuse came in with the military. And when they left us with the mess. So it is how do we get back to that low profile wives, but while performing their duties that we had in the First Republic. That is the essence of the debate.
Thank you for that, sir. I want to move over to BRICS, sir, because there is some news coming out of the meeting in South Africa that is probably worth discussing here. Now, given the time we have, I'm not sure we're going to complete the conversation, but we'll start it anyway. And as part of the expansion plan, there is talk about launching a BRICS currency to potentially challenge the impact of the dollar. And that caught my attention because I know that it was something that late President Gaddafi was trying to embark on in Libya, and which some said contributed to the opposition that he faced. What is your view about the BRICS summit and this particular aspect of the news that's coming out, sir?
We've discussed it on this program because actually there is an alternative currency platform of BRICS. Mrs. Youssef, who used to be president of Brazil after Lula and before Lula II, is the president of it. I think she will have 2 more years to run until it is passed on until the office of the president of that currency institution is passed on to somebody else. So it is not only in the offing, already they are involved in concretizing it. And in their movement towards it, they are already dealing an intermediate stage is this trading by barter. So that if India wants to sell something to Russia, rather than start to talk about exchange conversion and starting to pay exchange rates when you go through Washington or New York, you whatever goods that India has to offer, Russia can give them gold in return or oil in return and collect the goods. So that is in the offing now. Should Saudi Arabia become one of the new ones, it will even give tremendous boost because Saudi Arabia is awash with petrol, with petrodollars, whether it will become petro BRICS at that point, but there will be sufficient money in foreign exchange to actually sustain transactions within BRICS. And the advantages are many. Number one, you insulate yourself from even the fluctuations of the dollar. I mean, the United States, rather than pay off its debt, has simply raising the debt ceiling. It's the only country that can do that because it produces the dollars. Any other country in the world will not attempt to simply raise its debt ceiling to avoid going bankrupt. But if there's an alternative, you insulate yourself from the vagaries of the value of the dollar. Number two, which is probably more important, you protect yourself from your reserves being seized if politically you fall out with the Americans, if there's a dispute. And because what is happening, the lesson they've learned from the past is that at the slightest provocation, the Americans seize your reserves because the reserves are in dollars in New York or in Washington. This is it. And thereby impoverish you and grind your trade to a halt. But if your trading mechanism is not in dollars, it's another currency, then the Americans cannot impose that financial burden and threaten you with the thing being seized. So there are the advantages to having an alternative to what they now call the de-dollarization of international trade. There are advantages, but there are lots of details that need to be worked out, but it's moving in the right direction. There are problems as regards expansion of BRICS. Number one, they need to be careful that there's no stampede into the expansion and thereby weakening the concept of BRICS. They are going, in South Africa, at the meeting of the foreign ministers, the foreign ministers were supposed to deal with this issue. They couldn't. So they kicked the can forward to the August meeting of the heads of states of BRICS. From my own experience, I know what's going to happen in August because there were probably a few times in the then OAU when we, the foreign ministers, could not agree on what to recommend to our presidents and heads of states. So we referred the matter to them for decision. Well, we were roasted that are they our servants? That we refuse to do our work and we will kick decisions to them. They kicked it back to us and told us they were giving us 24 hours to go and resolve the matter and let them have a solution they could work on. And of course, when you are faced with that kind of roasting from your bosses, it concentrates the mind. And invariably, we will, all drop our objections. And so I can expect that at the summit in August, they will ask the foreign ministers to go into a side room and work out the criteria for admission of new members and who among the applicants meet this new criteria and bring that back to them for ratification, but that they don't do your work for you. But I can understand the difficulties of the heads of states because each one of them, there's an ego involved. If you have a problem with your neighbor who is applying and you're already a member, this is your opportunity, to grind his nose, against the blackboard. If you want to be the only country to be regarded as the leader of a continent. And there is now a new member applying whose credentials to membership are probably stronger than yours. You wouldn't want that. BRICS is supposed to be, an alternative to you know, is supposed to insulate global politics from all this, hanging on to world powers. And so those who may be pro-West or pro-East are really not so, because they may dilute the aims and objectives of BRICS if they are invited. But on the other hand, an organization that has Russia and China as key members, to what extent then is it a neutral body? Or should they then, invite one or two pro-West members so as to have a balancing? It's the whole issue of expansion needs to be carefully debated and worked out.
Thank you for that, sir. Given when we look at some of the countries that are there now, we look at specifically, China, India, Brazil, and we look at the economic growth, the economic position of China. And to a large extent, people talk about the fact that it's all about economics. What can you get to develop our environment? China clearly seems to be the one country that may have the economic wherewithal to support some of the other countries in the region. And we're even seeing that in the Ukrainian war. China still seems to be somewhat aligned with Russia. Do you think this could turn out to be an organization dominated by China? And what can we do to prevent that from being the case? And then there's a question here that I will put to you, sir.
You've raised the issue of the elephant in the room. It's not being spoken out publicly, but how do you prevent China from dominating BRICS? Even Russia has become, Russia has lost its gravitas vis-a-vis China. The Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union that we know, China used to be the appendage. Now, the situation has been reversed. What is the solution? Is it by inviting such countries that have strong economic base, not individually to challenge Chinese position, but collectively? Like if you were to invite, maybe Indonesia, Chile, Nigeria, could those three, now along with Brazil and India, be a counterbalancing economic force to China? Would that be a way to go? Or would that be alternative paths? But surely the issue of domination of BRICS economically by China will be at the background of such countries like India that has problems with China. Um, so you've raised the elephant in the room, that they will have to I mean to contend with. Will South Africa look favorably on admission of Nigeria? Egypt has applied to join. Will South Africa prefer Egyptian membership to Nigerian membership? If Egypt is admitted, what's going to be the position of Israel? So, I mean, you can understand why the foreign ministers couldn't come to a decision. But the funny thing is, these issues are not being articulated openly, but they're being whispered under their breath.
Hmm. Thank you, sir. One person says here that the move towards de-dollarization is a very important one. In local trade, we encourage non-monopolistic approach as a way to protect the market and to ensure that we avoid cabals. The same is needed in international political economy. The global north acts like a cabal and a monopolistic one at that. We need more alternative to end this hegemony. It may not be easy, but with the collective effort of BRICS Plus, it's possible to have an alternative. I think that supports the point that you have been making as well, sir. I don't know if you want to respond to that before we go off for tonight.
I agree. No. I agree. And the point is well articulated. I agree with it.
There's one point I want to ask you, sir, before we go. I know we're over time, but it's a humanitarian disaster. And that's the dam that's, well, some call it was a target of an attack. Others have called it something else. Whichever way, the people in Ukraine are suffering even more and on the brink of a major humanitarian disaster. What is your take on the explosion that's taking place at the dam?
It's unfortunate. It's a major disaster. It's not even, we are not on the brink of a humanitarian disaster. We are already now in a situation of a humanitarian disaster. I'm not going to take side because I really don't have evidence to support which side did this. The Americans have satellites up there that monitor the world 24/7. And I'm sure they can show us that puff that an explosion gives. So if these are explosions that brought down this dam, surely we should be able to see those puffs wherever they manifest before the dam gets broken. But as I said, I won't take sides, but whatever it is, it's a major disaster for Ukraine. This is people who are suffering. Now, part of the consequences are that mines which were laid have been dislodged and they are floating down with that rush of water that may go into the Black Sea. And what now happens to the shipping lanes in the Black Sea? How do you contain this? Of course, the human beings, only God knows how many of them are submerged under that water, who were caught unprepared and who you've not been able to rescue. We must not forget the nuclear installations that are there, which this water from the dam is supposed to cool the nuclear core, the inner core, and provide it from overheating. Right now, IAEA has assured us that there are backup plants and backup water to do the cooling. But would that be sufficient? And for how long will backup mechanism be sufficient, to protect and cool down this nuclear, the inner core of these nuclear installations? We may be on the verge, I hope, of another Chernobyl if we are not careful. But we need to bring this war to an end. We do need to bring this war to an end. How and why? I've made suggestions, on this platform several times. I haven't changed my mind about, the role of the Pope, along, I suppose, now with China that has put a plan on the table. The plan is one-sided, but the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese need talking to. They need talking to.
Thank you very much for tonight. Thank you to our viewers who have stayed with us. We'll be back same time next week and more topics. I had a lot more topics that I wanted to ask you about, sir, but I will leave those till next week, and we'll address them with any new events that we have from next week. I want to talk about Iran and the hypersonic missile that they've developed. They say they've developed. It would be good to hear your views about that. And also about Saudi Arabia and the increasing influence of Saudi Arabia in sports. It would also be good to get your views on those, but I will leave them till next week because we've run out of time today. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you to all our viewers for joining. We'll be back same time next week. Good night for now.
Wakanda.